Hi, everyone, and welcome to another one of our In Conversation with Evolving HR episodes. This week, I'm joined by Fay Wallis. Hi,
Hello.
Fay. Thank you so
Hi.
much for joining me. We decided, 'cause Fay and I, there are lots of elements of what we do that are not the same, but there are also we have some subject matter interests in common. And one of the things that both of us are very passionate about is strategy. I know that sounds incredibly boring, but it isn't. And Faye and I are both very passionate about strategy, and in particular, when it comes to HR professionals, strategic HR, strategic thinking, that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to talk about, isn't it, Faye?
It certainly is. And thank you very much for inviting me to talk about it with you.
You're so welcome. Why is it you think that that there are kind of almost scary connotations to the word strategy, and that some people kind of get a little bit freaked out at the thought of it?
I think strategy and strategic, they're two of those business jargony words that lots of people don't really know what they mean. I know I certainly didn't know what they meant for absolutely ages. And
Same.
they just seem slightly terrifying to so many of us at various points, I think. And I think a big part of the way in helping build confidence around being more strategic is getting clear in your mind on what the words actually mean. And when you break them down, you realize, oh, actually, yep, okay, I can do that. They're skills that I have. It hasn't got to be this really frightening thing.
Yeah. I don't think I realized what strategic thinking looked like until after I left in-house HR and when I started doing HR consultancy, which is quite scary because I did in-house HR for 20 years. You said before that you used to kind of struggle with the concept. What was it that changed for you? Where did you kind of have your penny drop moment?
Yeah, I would say a very similar thing to you, Kirsty, which is that while I was working in HR as an HR practitioner, I didn't really know what it meant. It did feel a bit scary. I remember the HR director, who was fabulous, who I worked for, had went on a training day and said, I feel so much better about this. They've just pointed out, it can be about having a plan. And that was kind of the extent of my knowledge, really, about what it meant. But that actually feeds into another aspect of why I think, in particular, a lot of HR professionals can struggle with what these concepts mean. And that is because we weren't taught it. HR has evolved so much that for decades, there wasn't a focus on being strategic. It wasn't something that was talked about. So it wasn't something that you would learn from someone who is in a more senior level role from you necessarily. If there was no expectation that an HR department should be a strategic function within a business, that really is something that has evolved over time. And it's been interesting to see actually that I do think it is being covered more now if you sign up for formal training. And so some of that fear is starting to diminish. But for huge swathes of people who've been in the profession for, well, whether they've been in for a short period of time or a long period of time, they'll just never have been taught it.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? I think when I first noticed it starting was when Ulrich created the business partner model. And this whole new idea of HR functions with centers of excellence and specialists, and you'd have these strategic business partners. And I finished my CIPD in 2001. It was quite a long time ago. And I remember being in a restructure of an HR team in about 2005, 6, and they had decided that we were going to move to the Ulrich model. And none of us had a clue what that was going to mean. Like when people said you're going to be a strategic business partner, and we were all sat there thinking, yeah, but what are we going to be doing all day? Because you're just telling us like the recruitment's going to be a separate team and training's going to be a separate team and ER's going to be like, what am I going to be doing all day? And I don't think I got the answers at that time. And ultimately that restructure did not go well. And they ended up going back again about 6 months later because it was a bit of a mess. But that was the first time I kind of became aware of the concept that we should be in a more strategic position within the organization. I don't think I ever had a role in my in-house HR career where it felt like I was able to think or work strategically, because I think a lot of the time the expectation of non-HR managers still remains that we are an administrative policy process, make sure everything gets done function. And so I don't, even if we feel ready for, working more strategically with business leaders, they don't always want that from us. And that was an obstacle that I came across quite often. I don't know about you. It's the perceptions of HR are quite different in the HR profession to people outside the HR profession.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what organization you're working in. I'd definitely say when I was in a standalone HR role, I don't know, would I have been asked for my strategic input? It feels such a long time ago now, I'm not sure. But the role I had after that, where we did get renamed as HR business partners, I think I was very, very lucky that the MD at that organization was incredibly open and very focused on solving challenges. And she would happily listen to anyone who would come to her with ideas. So I think I was really, really fortunate to have been exposed to that. But on the flip side of that, I remember her progressing with some of my ideas, and that was just so exciting. And I was absolutely thrilled about it. But I also remember her saying no to something that I'd worked really hard on and thought, oh, she's going to love this idea. And, oh, I'm going to have such an impact. And she just said, yeah, no, we're not doing that. And I remember being so upset, like I wasn't geared up for the no at that point. But again, at the time, I don't know if I would necessarily have realized. Now you're making me think maybe I was actually doing a bit more strategic work than I probably recognized at the time, because I didn't have the language for it or the understanding for it. And I realized I haven't answered your question. Sorry, Kirsty.
That's okay.
How did I develop the knowledge of it? I think it's when I became a coach, which was 10 years ago now, and I started coaching people from across all professions. I was really lucky to do that and really enjoyed it. But gradually over time, I started having more and more HR professionals come to me for coaching. And it was when that happened that I began to realize how many people were finding it difficult to fully understand what was really meant by being strategic and strategy. And so although as a coach, if you're taking a pure coaching approach, you're not meant to give any advice. I thought, well, actually, I need to learn more about this. I want to feel properly equipped to be able to help, whether that means slipping into actually starting to give some mentoring or also start to offer some training. And so I just started kind of immersing myself in the world of strategy and trying to learn as much as I could about strategy and being strategic. And it was through that I began to realize, oh, okay, this isn't this mystical thing at all. It's something that everyone's capable of doing. And I became completely obsessed with it, it would seem. How about you? What do you think it really was that made the switch for you?
I know exactly what it was, and it was nothing to do with HR, which is really interesting. It was when I started working as an HR consultant, and I was going in to do audits at organizations of not just their HR operations, but also looking at, where the business was going. It suddenly hit me that a lot of the CEOs that I was dealing with didn't know or weren't able to articulate that. And so I think that was my first big realization, was a lot of business leaders don't know what strategy is either. And then you've got HR professionals trying to think strategically in an organization that doesn't have a well-defined strategy or even have a strategy at all. That was such a huge surprise to me. And it's probably still now one of the areas where I do the most coaching with HR professionals. It's around, are you working in an environment where your leadership team are strategic? And I always bang on about the growth example. And I'm sure, because it's my proper eye roller, when you ask somebody what their organization strategy is and they say, we want to grow. I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Buckle up, because I have 42 questions for you. And just realize, sitting and having conversations with CEOs to try and dig out, what do you mean by growth? How much do you want to grow by? Where are you right now? And is that growth target that you've just talked about, which is a target, not a strategy, how far off is that? How long might it take you to achieve that? And then, sort of digging into what are the different levers that you can pull that might make that achievable in 6 months versus a year, and realizing that so many of them, especially in small businesses, have never thought about it. They've never thought about it. They're just like, yeah, obviously we want to make more money than last year, but that's not a strategy. Make more money than last year. It's like, how are you going to do it is the strategy. So I think, if we're going to shatter a myth here, what I would say to people is strategy is really simply how you're going to get from where you are right now to where you want to be, in its simplest form, isn't it? That's what it is. But unless you can articulate where you are right now and where you want to be, you cannot come up with a strategy for getting there. It's like going into Google Maps and just going, get me somewhere. It's like you have to have your blue dot and you have to have your red pin, because the line between those two, that's your strategy for getting there. Your directions or whatever, but that is your strategy. And if you that's where I start with everybody. It's like, do you know where your blue dot is? Do you know where your red pin is? Okay, now we can have a conversation about strategy. And so it was through working with leadership teams rather than HR professionals that it really kind of sunk in for me, which is really interesting. And then I've kind of flipped that round to have those conversations through an HR lens. And it's amazing how many HR professionals are working with something that has been presented to them as a business strategy, but actually isn't one. I mean, you must have seen some shockers as well. I mean, the 89-page PowerPoint presentations that don't say a single thing about what good looks like or how we're going to know when we get there.
Well, I think, I know exactly what you mean about the fact that so many organizations, especially smaller ones, don't have a strategy at all. And I also think, going back to what we were saying earlier about the fact that HR didn't used to be expected to be strategic until the Ulrich model came in, that there's been this big push and a lot of talk about, especially in the HR press, about HR needs to be more strategic. And we've been being told that for more than 10 years now. And so what I think is quite encouraging to see is how seriously lots of people in the HR profession take that and do try to learn how and to operate more strategically. And what I've started to see now is that sometimes the HR person is the most strategic person in the business. So they end up being the person who ends up coaching the rest of the leadership team on what strategy is and the fact that there does need to be one and how everyone's going to go about it, instead of everyone operating in their own little silos or not having clear plans or going off and doing stuff that they think is really interesting rather than all being aligned on working on something together. So for me, I think that's been quite an exciting thing to see and quite an exciting evolution to see.
But it's an adjustment, isn't it, for people, because they think, I think you start off and you think, okay, right, need to be more strategic. Someone's told me this is the strategy. And then they sit there thinking, I don't know what I'm supposed to make of this. And they assume that the fault is with them. And I think that's a really important message to get to people. It's like, no, sometimes you will be the only one thinking that way, like you just said. But I think we have a fairly unique opportunity within leadership teams to be able to coach the leadership team as a whole, because like you said, everybody else is in their little silos. We kind of cut across every area of the business. And whilst you might argue that the CEO could be the person to facilitate those conversations, invariably they won't be, and it won't happen. But that's where we can really add value. But it's not the sort of skill or responsibility that is often talked about as being something that should fall to HR. But I do think that when you can get yourself to that point where you're facilitating those conversations and you're helping pull your leadership team in the same direction, that feels like a massive win for me from an HR perspective and from a strategic thinking perspective. But it's getting people confident to do that is always a challenge.
It is a massive win. I totally agree.
I love it. I mean, there's the one aspect of the work that I do now. I do management due diligence on behalf of private equity companies. So I do it through another company that have all of the relationships with the PE houses, and we get allocated projects. So I just go in as a freelancer. But you go in and I interview the leadership team in depth. So I'll spend like 2 hours with each member of the leadership team. We put them through a psychometric leadership impact assessment. We have them answer a huge survey around their confidence in the current business strategy, how well articulated it is, whether they've got KPIs or milestones and all that. So then we get all of this data back, and then I have to analyze it all and say to the PE company, yep, this is a backable organization. I think the strategy needs to be tweaked here and here. Do I think you've got the right team in place to deliver that strategy? Doing that work has given me, again, a really, really helpful perspective on how businesses work and how they think about growth and what it's going to look like and where they're trying to get to as a business. And there's invariably, those organizations don't even have an HR person. And so I will be challenging those leaders and having those conversations as part of the due diligence that nobody's ever questioned them before. Nobody's ever asked them those things before. And so I try to encourage HR professionals to get a bit more comfortable with dipping into those sorts of conversations. They get some really interesting reactions. It's quite funny.
Oh, you have to tell us more about the interesting reactions. What kind of reactions do you get?
I mean, sometimes they get shut down because the rest of the leadership team are like, hang on a minute, that's not your lane. Why are you stepping out of your lane? What is going on here? But there was one lady who, she did my SPICE program, and she was pretty quick to realize that what had been presented to them as a business strategy really wasn't. It wasn't giving any guidance on how they were going to get wherever they were going. And so she started asking the questions, and the CEO looked at her and just went, why are you asking me the questions that the finance director asks me? I thought,
that's brilliant.
I thought, bingo. And she was like, should I be worried about this? And I said, no, that's exactly the right, like, the reason he was getting so uncomfortable was because he didn't have the answers. And now he was getting it from two people, not just finance. But he was so shocked that there was an HR person asking him those questions. And then, because he couldn't answer them. So then we talked about, like, how could she approach this more gently so that he didn't feel like he was being bulldozed, kind of thing. But how can we just, like, draw it out of people so that they define a bit more of a direction. But I love those conversations. I think they're great fun.
And I think a lot of people, although obviously that CEO didn't react brilliantly in the moment where he's probably quite taken aback, I do think that there's so much value in just asking the really simple questions, which again, I think is why I quite like the whole concept of strategy and being strategic, is that it hasn't got to be wildly complicated. Like all of the things that you mentioned earlier about, okay, well, what are the aims for the organization? What are the measures? How are you going to get there? They might take a lot of thinking to be able to work out what are the answers to those, but they're not wildly difficult questions to consider. And the big problem with any leadership is having space to think. So I think that if there is an HR person who is able to have that opportunity or craft that opportunity or make sure it's happening, that people are actually sitting down collectively as a leadership team and talking about it and just answering some pretty simple questions together, it's so incredibly powerful, because a lot of approaches I think can be really outdated or ineffective, like this idea that the CEO is setting the strategy and that's it. That sounds like a terrible idea to me. Yeah. You want to make sure you have got input from all of the different functions and all of the different key people before you do it. So
what are your thoughts around HR strategy and how, I'm trying to ask this in not a leading way, because I know that you're going to have the same view as me, but I think I have seen organizations where the HR strategy is kind of designed in isolation by an HR leader who is putting the things that they think the organization needs. And I've seen it done where there isn't an actual HR strategy articulated as such. There are just people elements of the overall business strategy. Just interested in your thoughts on that and how, and some of the kind of misconceptions that there are around, creating this all singing, all dancing HR strategy.
Yeah, I think And I want to say it without any judgment as well, I think, because it can be a really tricky thing to be tackling as an HR professional, because it very much depends on, as you were saying, the culture that you're in and what the CEO or MD or whoever's running the show thinks of HR and what their own understanding of strategy is and how they're approaching it. And depending on what level that person is who's been asked to write some form of strategy, because there is a real danger if you are just writing an HR strategy that you aren't necessarily creating something that is properly linked in with the organization strategy. And I think that can happen for all sorts of reasons. Like when you said earlier, lots of organizations don't have a strategy. And it may be that the HR person's been desperately trying to get everyone within the leadership team or to get the CEO on board with the idea that there needs to be a strategy and just hasn't managed it. So it's thought, right, okay, then, well, I'm having my own one for my team. So I'm going to do my best and I'm going to figure out where I think we're going, what I think the challenges are. And, they may be criticized for that by other people saying, no, it's all got to be linked in perfectly with the overarching strategy, or there shouldn't even be a separate people strategy. But I think we've got to do the best we can in the situation.
Yeah, that's not always available to you, is it? It's not always an option. Yeah.
No, it's really not. And, if you're working for an absolutely massive organization and perhaps you're, a part of it, but you're what's the word, subsidiary of it, for example, you've got to wait for the strategy to come down from on high, and it takes absolutely months, and then when it lands, it doesn't really feel like it's hugely relevant to where you're working, but it's nigh on impossible to have an impact on that top parent company one. Then again, you've got to do the best with what you've got. So I think, it's the problem with theories, isn't it, that it's easy when you're not in that situation to say, well, actually, there shouldn't even be a separate HR strategy. It should just be the people lens, the people agenda should be being considered at the absolute top level. It is interwoven within the core organization strategy. That's kind of the utopian ideal, I think.
That's the holy grail, yeah.
I think. But that's me getting all worked up about it. What do you think?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, I've worked for a company called Koch Industries for over 10 years, massive, like second largest privately owned company in the US, over 100,000 employees. I don't know how many different Coke companies there were, many. We were a trading organization of 500 people that was a subsidiary of Koch Industries. So we had our own business strategy just for Coke Supply and Trading that may or may not have looked anything similar to the Coke Industries one. I never saw a Coke Industries business strategy. I was like, we felt like you work for a separate organization. And so it's like you said, you do what you can. You do within the world that you have any influence or control over, you do what you can. And yeah, I mean, I suppose I've worked for a lot of smaller organizations as well, where, there's 40 people or 50 people. And so it's much easier to have everybody pulling in the same direction towards the same goal when there's only 40 or 50 of you. It's a lot easier to articulate what that looks like as well. But yeah, there's a mix. And I think we need to not beat ourselves up over whether we're doing one or the other or something in between, because it does vary massively from organization to organization. The other thing, I think, something that I feel we don't often talk about, there seems to be this thinking that you are either operational HR or you are strategic HR. And I would argue that you can think strategically in any role in HR in the organization, regardless of your day-to-day tasks and responsibilities. You can still think strategically, because I don't really love that divide that seems to have been created in people's minds that, I'm doing operational HR today, but one day I'll be strategic. It's like, well, a lot of what you're doing from an operational perspective may actually be strategic. If it's helping the organization move towards its goals, then, recruitment can be highly strategic. If it's targeted in an area that is, causing the organization problems right now, and you're going to fix those problems by hiring people, then that recruitment activity is strategic. So I think I don't know, sometimes I think we think that it's either one or the other. And I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah, that is such a good point. You're completely right. There's so much said, isn't there, about the difference between operational and strategic, and it makes you think, well, I'm just in an operational role now, but one day I'll be being
it's not
strategic.
good and bad either. It's not,
No.
it's not like one's good, one's not.
Bad. No. I think one of my favorite books about strategy that I think I've mentioned to you before is called The Strategy Book, and it's by Dr. Max McEwen. And I really love that book because it was that book that properly demystified strategy for me and made it feel so much more accessible, because he describes strategy in exactly the way that you did, which is it's about shaping a path towards the future. But what he also says in the book is that we are all strategic already. We have all had an idea for a goal we want to achieve in the future, and then we've taken steps and put plans in place to achieve it. And he says, for example, if you wanted a new job, you probably, I can't actually remember if this is one of his examples, but this is an example. If you wanted a new job, then it might mean that you wrote your CV and you met with a recruiter, or you started searching for roles online so that you could get that new job. You're aiming for that in the future. There's a future state you want to have. If you want to meet a romantic partner, it might be that you decide to go on a dating app and start going on dates. If you want to, I always use my husband's birthday party as an example. When he turned 60, I really wanted to do something special for him. Oh my gosh, it took me so many steps to finally get to the point of having arranged something for his birthday. All of those things are examples of being strategic. And then to talk about another book that I think helped layer on an extra level, or just a slightly different approach to it as well, is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, The Difference and Why It Matters by Richard Rummels. And in it, he talks about the fact that good strategy solves a problem. And so it's looking at what are the biggest challenges that need to be overcome within the organization. So when you're deciding on that future state, okay, why have you picked that? What challenges is it overcoming? And then working out how you're going to then get to where you want to. I think all of this is so reassuring for everybody, because you're right. It doesn't matter what job you're doing. You have got those skills. You're using them in your personal life, and you're probably using them all the time within your work life as well. If you see something and you think that could be done in a better way and it's going to have a really positive impact, so I'm going to change that slightly. That's a little strategic action that you've taken. It may not be one that is completely focused on the big organization strategy, but you are still using strategic thinking and strategic skills. So I keep just saying to you, Kirsty, I agree, or absolutely.
But I think it's so important that people know that and accept that, instead of telling themselves that, oh, I don't have those skills, I'm not strategic. Actually, you are, like you've just said, like in lots of little ways that you might not have thought about, because, and you used an expression which I always loved about demystifying strategy, because there is this weird mystique that's kind of been developed around it, and it actually really isn't that complicated at all. But it's, it's sometimes just helping people understand that is all it takes, for them to think, oh, hang on a minute, I can do this. This isn't, I mean, it's definitely not rocket science, but it's just, I think, I don't know, there's a combination of factors, I think, that have led to it being seen as something more than it is. And that's happened over a very long time. And so it's just a question of breaking that down. Something that you were saying there about solving problems. I think that's quite critical, particularly if you're in an organization where nobody's actually articulated an overall business strategy, but you can always take a step back and think, okay, what are the problems that we're facing as an organization? Like what's getting in our way? And I'm a nerd. I love a good old-fashioned SWOT analysis. You don't have to call it that. You don't have to draw the thing and use those words, but I think in SWOT analysis terms a lot of the time. It's like, what is holding us back? What might the obstacles be? And so where I would typically start from, in the absence of anything else, is what is a problem in this organization that I might be able to fix from an HR perspective? And I have a wonderful example from an old coaching client of mine where she said, I've got to write a strategy, not sure where to start, blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, okay, tell me about a problem that your organization is facing. And she knows I use this example all the time. I will never name them. And funnily enough, she doesn't actually work in HR anymore. But she said, we lost 30% of our clients last year. And I was like, sorry? And she said, yep, we lost 30% of our clients last year. And I went, good God. I said, that's huge. If that happens 3 times, you've got no clients, basically. I said, what's caused it? And she said, oh, it's a complete nightmare. The sales director hates the customer success director. And between the two of them, they've created this complete us and them situation where the sales guys are bringing in new clients, like chucking them over a wall to customer success with no information. Customer success are just, they're not making any effort. So the clients leave because they're like, this is a complete mess. And so you've got 2 different teams who are critical to onboarding clients who are like this the whole time. And I remember, you know what it's like with coaching, you just hold the space. And she just looked at me, she went, that's my biggest priority, isn't it, fixing that? And I said, I think it's probably where I would start. And so she went away and she created this whole plan that involved, like, they ended up exiting one of the 2 directors because one of them had been a little more proactive in stirring up trouble than the other. So it ended up with, serious conversations about the dynamics between these 2 people, making a change there, doing cross-training between sales and customer success so that they understood each other's roles, and then really trying to create one cohesive culture where they work together. Because, I mean, that's something that always blows my mind, where you've got people working against each other in the same organization. It's like, how is that ever going to be successful? And she ended up delivering this like phenomenally strategic plan that fixed this enormous problem that nobody else in the organization had looked at it through a simple people lens, because all of those issues, everything that was creating that problem was people related. So with a mixture of training and some difficult conversations, bit of restructuring and that sort of thing, culture change, like fixed. And so you think, for anybody listening to this, that's not super, it's not super complicated thinking and work that you need a PhD for. It's common sense, but there's always going to be a people element to every business problem, because you can't run a business without people.
And there are times, if we go back to that idea of the organization strategy is set and then it's presented to you as an HR professional, which isn't necessarily ideal, but then you have to work out, okay, how am I going to make sure that the people agenda is incorporated into this, or how am I going to derive the HR strategy and plan and targets from this? Then, oh God, I can't remember what I was going to say now. Hang on. Sorry, this has gone out my head.
It's going so well.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay, right. Here we go. Let's go again. Third time lucky. Oh, that's such an exciting example to hear about. It's wonderful when you can see an HR professional having such an impact, and from being able to do that by asking the simple questions like we were talking about earlier, saying, what is the biggest challenge? What is the biggest problem? It's amazing what it unearths. That's not a really, really difficult question to solve a lot of the time. But in instances where there isn't an obvious HR lead in to something that's happening within the organization. So for example, let's say you are in an organization where you are told, okay, this is the organization strategy. And you look at it and think, I don't know, how should HR be contributing to this? What kind of people agenda could there be if I have to create an HR strategy or people plan from this? Oh, how is it going to work? How's it going to link in? That's where I do think it is amazing that we have got AI now. Not that I think in a million years that you should be feeding in any sort of confidential information, but
quick caveat.
Just even using it as a thinking partner. I was supporting one lovely coaching client who I have, whose organization is dictated that the format of the strategy has to be OKRs, which stands for objective and key results. So that is a format that's particularly popular in the tech sector. And so you say what the individual HR objectives are, and then how you know you're going to have achieved it by the key results. So they would typically be metrics or measures. And they were finding it really challenging to do this. It wasn't a format they were really used to. And we were talking about, well, what are the overall objectives of the organization? What do you think you could be contributing? And then literally just saying to AI, what could be some good measures for this objective, or how could we state this objective in a way that is really impactful or really effective or really meets the format for OKRs. And it was just brilliant seeing the suggestions it comes up with and the ideas that it gives, and just really acts as this brilliant thinking partner. So I think that's one way that we can really be using AI to help us think through, okay, these are the organization's challenges, or this is the organization's strategy. I may have some ideas or no ideas. Like, how as a people function can we be contributing to this? What are the levers that we need to be pulling? What are the kinds of things we need to be thinking about? What kind of solutions could we be coming up with? So yeah, that's just one thing to mention as well.
I'm a big advocate for AI in so many different ways. I side quest. I'm getting a little annoyed by the fact that nearly every LinkedIn post I read now sounds like the same person wrote it. Now, I absolutely understand that people are doing it to save time. I get that. Where I think AI is brilliant is if you need if it's something formal writing, like, oh, I've got to write a response to a grievance letter. And again, without putting in anything confidential, it can give you really great wording for that you could otherwise sit and agonize over for an hour and a half and be tweaking it. But for the thought partnership piece, I think it's really useful, isn't it? It's like, I've done that with so many things, like, hey, I've had this idea. If I was going to do this, this, and this, what might that look like? It's really, really helpful for kind of, especially when you're a standalone role and you haven't got anybody else you can talk to about it. It's good, it's really helpful because it's just so immediate, isn't it, as well? And it gives you stuff then to go away with and work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And even thinking, let's say you're in an organization that's a well-oiled machine, lucky you, and you're thinking, well, I don't really know, what are the biggest problems? Then often it might be a threat that's coming externally or a change that's happening in the world. But you can't necessarily see it. It can be quite hard when you're in an organization. You can become quite inwards looking. And again, that's where I think AI can be helpful at saying, this is the sector I work in, this is the country I'm in, what are some of the challenges for this sector? And it's incredible what it can throw up that you just hadn't really considered, but that can then be incredibly useful to be working on as part of your strategy.
The other thing I want to ask you, I'm interested in your thoughts around confidence. So to what extent do you think confidence holds HR professionals back from sort of putting themselves forward for more strategic conversations and challenging leadership? And well, I mean, challenging in a non-confrontational way, but even just asking those questions. Do you think it plays a part in what holds people back?
Yes. Oh gosh, confidence is such a big topic. We could be doing a whole chat about that, couldn't we? I remember the very first time I did any sort of formal mentoring. Gosh, it was years and years and years ago now, maybe about 15 years ago. I signed up to a scheme that was being run by the university I'd been to support some of the students who were there. And I remember being matched with this highly intelligent, highly accomplished woman who was studying for a degree in, I can't think what the word was now, pharmacy. She was going to be a pharmacist. And she sat in front of me and I just thought, wow, she's amazing. And she said, I really want to work on my confidence. And I remember thinking, how on earth am I supposed to help her with this? She's absolutely incredible. And there were a whole group of us mentees, and we got to meet, as a group and have a little bit of training to support us. And you could ask each other for advice. And I said to one of the other mentees who'd been doing it for a really, really long time, like, help, what do I do? She said she wants help with confidence, but she's incredible and she's so clever and she's doing this and she's sciencey and I'm not sciencey. And he said, oh, well, just narrow it down. No one isn't confident at everything. Everyone is confident at certain things. There'll be something in particular, Faye, hone in on what that is. And I think that is the best advice that anyone has ever given me when it comes to confidence, because it's really easy to fool yourself into thinking that you're not a confident person, but that's not true.
Mhm.
You're confident at brushing your teeth. You might be confident that you like what kind of books you read. You might be
Yeah.
confident at driving. Like, there will be set things that you're not confident about. So
Mm.
I think to anyone who might be listening and is thinking, oh, I don't feel confident about, I don't feel confident at all. My challenge would be, what's the one specific thing that you would like to feel more confident in? Is it being able to challenge someone at work constructively? Or is it being able to write a strategy? Or is it being able to recognize that you're thinking strategically? Like, boil it down to that one thing. And then suddenly it feels far more manageable. It's much easier to then be strategic about becoming more confident, because you can come up with a plan and come up with steps to try and work on that. So I wouldn't say that people, just because they work in HR, aren't confident. I think people across
No.
all professions are going to have certain confidence challenges. But if there is one challenge that I see happen as people become more and more senior within their HR career when it comes to confidence, I think it's about feeling they don't know enough about business, because you work your way up your HR career becoming an HR expert. And then suddenly, when you step into director or CHRO level, you're being asked for your opinion on wider business issues that you can't see an obvious people lens through. And that can be really scary. And I totally understand why that's when people have a massive confidence wobble.
And because I have had exactly that issue with more than one coaching client. How do you advise them in those situations?
Well, again, like coming back, I guess it depends when that comes up. So if it is if it is with a coaching client, I'll ask them some questions, because again, there's no one prescriptive way of getting this right and building up that business knowledge. But it will be, okay, what do you think would be the most helpful thing to focus on first? Where is it that you're feeling the least confident? And a lot of people will say, it's the numbers, or I don't understand what the sales director's talking about. And so I'll say, okay, well, what are some of the different things you can do? And so people will come up with all different sorts of plans as to how they're going to plug that gap, whether it's starting to go to more industry events so they're more immersed in that world, whether it's going and sitting with the sales team and listening to the calls coming in so they understand the customers more who are coming in, whether it's sitting down with the finance director and saying, look, I don't like admitting this, but I'm not fully grasping all these numbers. Can you just explain them to me? So it really depends on the person, the context, and where those challenges lie.
I think some of the themes that I see, it's when it's something new. I think people in general have a tendency to worry that because it's new. I don't think it's HR exclusive, but I think we assume that people are going to expect us to get up to speed immediately. And if something's new and we're not up to speed yet, there's almost like this fear that they're going to ask me to stand up and present for 20 minutes on this. And I've only just found out that I've got to know about it, and I'm going to make a fool of myself. And I think we do worry about that sometimes. And one thing that I always like to try and remind people is, yes, you might be on the leadership team, but you're being invited to the leadership team as an HR professional. And so the expectation is only ever going to be that you bring solutions through a people lens. Like, nobody would expect the finance director to come up with people solutions. Nobody would expect the sales director to come up with a forecast from a finance perspective. It's like we all have we bring something different to those meetings, and then you've got the combined individuals in that meeting, that's the leadership team as a whole, but you're all bringing something different to it. And I think sometimes we worry that because it's new and we haven't done it before, they're suddenly going to expect me to be the sales director and I'm going to come unstuck because I don't know that stuff. And again, there's a kind of fear of the unknown thing there. So I've worked with people who are highly competent HR directors who sit in leadership teams thinking don't ask me a question, don't ask me a question. I'm like, what is it that you're telling yourself? That they're going to ask me something that I can't answer. I'm like, okay, like what? What do you there's more to it. And they're like, I think they're suddenly going to ask me about the numbers. Well, they're not. They're going to ask the finance director about the numbers. They're not going to ask you to present the numbers. And so I do think, sometimes that we kind of rush ahead in our minds and we worry that we're going to be put on the spot in some way, or that the expectation is that we're suddenly good at everything. And yeah, it's not the case. It's not the case. And so I think, I don't know, mostly leadership team meetings are fairly dull, aren't they? Let's be honest. I think we worry more about them in advance than we need to. I don't know. I see that come up a lot where it's, when you're starting to operate in a more senior way and they don't want to challenge because in case they say the wrong thing and people think that they don't know what they're talking about. And yeah, I think just human nature, I think we'll hold back until we're really sure about something. So don't always get our voices heard when we probably should, but it comes in time, doesn't it? It's like the more you do it, the less new it is.
Absolutely. Anything new is always, well, for most of us, I think anything new is always a bit scary. And I'd be a bit worried for someone to be doing something brand new for the first time and have no nerves about it at all and just think, I'm going to be brilliant at this. That would be a real worry. But as you were talking, it made me think of two things. And one is that you should definitely be mentioning your fabulous book about building confidence. I can't see it. Let me put it right there. Yeah. You need to hold it up.
I do. I can't reach it from here, but yeah, I'll put a link below to my book.
For anyone who'd like to feel more confident, because I thought it was I thought it was fantastic when I read it. I think it still is fantastic, even though I'm not reading it right now. There are so many practical tips in there, and you can really see your HR background shine through in that book. It's so relatable, and I just love the advice that you give in there. And then to your other point about how nerve-wracking it can be in those leadership team meetings for the first time, and that it can really impact confidence. I really do think that coaching skills can be so incredibly helpful for HR professionals.
I wish I'd done it earlier.
Yeah, me too, because I think a lot of the value that you can bring to those meetings isn't being able to have some perfect, polished, genius answer to a challenge or a question. It's often about being able to ask more questions in that room. And that is what you learn when you learn coaching skills. So again, I think that for anyone who's looking to develop professionally, that is something I would definitely encourage. And I don't know if you've ever seen, I really like this model, but they don't seem to be talking about it so much now. They're talking about AI a lot now. Gartner have got, what's it called? Something like model of a CHRO 2.0, I think it's called. And in it looks at the different pillars that they believe the CHRO role brings to an organization, like the value that they bring and how they can be as helpful as possible. And one of those pillars is trusted advisor and coach. And I thought, I totally agree. The coach part is so true. It's not necessarily about always having an answer. It can just be about asking a question to help everyone think more. Like you shared when you were talking about your coaching client and you said to them, what's the biggest challenge in the business? Like being able to ask that, unlocked a brilliant strategy. It's the same thing in a leadership meeting.
It's I was talking to Pete Colby earlier today. He says hello, by the way. And mediation skills and coaching skills, they are the two things that I wish that I had learned, like post-professional qualification, like do that. And then coaching skills, mediation skills. I think it would have made HR in some of the organizations I work for a lot more easy to navigate. And to be able to share some of those skills with line managers as well would have made such a huge difference. So I will pop a link below actually to the mediation skills training that Pete offers, and also the coaching skills training that Amy Nazareth Wheeler offers, because she, not only do they do like professional coaching qualifications, but they have a course that is coaching skills for HR professionals, which is very specific. And I've heard great things about it. So I'll pop those links both there below. But it's that ability to communicate effectively, isn't it? Makes such a massive difference, and so much of it is in questions. Like
it really does. And I've done Pete's mediation skills training, and highly recommend it. It's brilliant. And Amy's coach training as well. I've had people who've been through my Inspiring HR Leadership program where I cover coaching skills a little bit. We don't do a full qualification in it, who have at the end said, oh, I like that so much, I want to actually go on and do a proper qualification. And they've gone on to do the training through Amy's company and have raved and have just said it's absolutely fantastic. So
yeah, I've only heard good things about it as well. So yeah, definitely. And yeah, again, if I was, you know, if it was 10 years ago, I'd absolutely be doing it now. But I'm just so glad I did my coaching qualification. It's just, and I never intended to be a coach. When I did the qualification, I just wanted to learn more about coaching skills. I thought it would be useful. And I realized like how many different elements of my work I use it in. Even if I'm not coaching a client one-to-one, I use it with everything. Because it is all about the questions and stuff. And you did yours ages ago, didn't you? Did you say it was like 10 years ago?
I've done loads. I think I'm addicted to doing coach training. I've done it in all various formats over the last 10 years. Yeah.
Do you know, Fay, one of the reasons I love having these conversations with people is because we're all such nerds about our topic. Like we're all super passionate about what we do and that whole commitment to lifelong learning. And you know, I still love to, I mean, you want to keep developing, don't you? You want to keep learning new skills and bringing that into what you already do. Yeah. It's just, and it's nice. You know, I'm 53 now. I've been working in HR since I was 25, 26. And the fact that I still get a kick out of it, I still find it really interesting and I still want to learn. I think that's awesome. Not everybody gets to say that after, you know, almost 3 decades, which is pretty cool.
No, definitely not. I think it's one of the best things about having an HR career is because there are so many skills. There's so much more you can learn. There are so many areas of responsibility that HR covers that you're never going to get bored. Like never ever are you going to get bored. It's definitely it can be one of the most challenging things, but it's also one of the best things I think about
that's so funny. I always used to say it's the best and the worst thing about working in HR is that you never know what's going to turn up on your desk from one day to the next. And it might be the most awesome project and you're like, oh, or it might be something horrendous that you wish you never had to deal with, but you never get 2 days the same, that's for sure. Oh, Fay, thank you so much for talking to me. We've gone on a lot longer than I planned to, but that's absolutely fine because I think there's some really useful information in here for people. So I will put links to everything that we've talked about in the description below. And for those of you watching, if you've got any questions for Fay or you would like to connect with her or learn more about her Inspiring Leadership program, Fay, where can they find you?
So probably the 2 best places are my website, which is brightskyhr.co.uk, or otherwise come find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there as myself, which is Fay Wallis, and Fay hasn't got an E on the end for some reason. I'm Fay, and Wallis is spelt Wallis, not the ACE. I don't know why there are so many different ways you can spell my name.
Yeah, that's really weird. Yeah, I'll put Fay's links below as well. And don't forget, for those of you watching, do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then you can get to watch all of these lovely conversations that I'm having with our providers. So once again, Fay, getting tongue-tied now. Thank you so much for joining me. This has just been such a lovely conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.